Welcome to episode 111 of the Hard Truth About B2B e-commerce. I'm your co-host, Isaiah Bollinger, and I'm back with Tim on a pretty amazing day. I don't know if you got the same weather we got, but I'm definitely going to be going outside later, maybe even get a tan. I don't know.
It's incredible. I mean, I'm wearing a short sleeve shirt again. It was 76 degrees here in New York yesterday, and it's about going to be the same today. It's absolutely incredible for the end of October. I mean, I'm just amazed. I'm going to spend the day walking around New York City tomorrow to soak more up. It's going to be great.
Yes, I'm in Chicago, where it's always sunny and 72 degrees.
Oh, absolutely.
You have to go inside sometimes or 30,000 feet, but it's always here.
Especially in
we legitimately have that kind of weather, so it's nice.
Especially in January, right? So.
So I want to make sure we're welcoming everybody to episode 111, and a big thank you to all of our listeners. I won't do any shout outs this week. I'll save some for another episode, but people are continuing to reach out, listening, and claiming to have listened to all of our episodes, which is extraordinary if they have. So thank you to them. And I want to just pause for a moment for to insert our sponsor mentions. And then I'm going to throw it back to Isaiah to introduce our guest. Balance is a B2B e-commerce payment solution that works well for you and for your buyers. It offers a seamless one-click checkout for almost any payment method, including ACH, wire, checks, cards, even terms. It's used by leaders in B2B e-commerce, and it's as easy as buying a shirt from Amazon. Check them out at getbalance.com. Book a session and tell them what your needs are. They are the first dedicated payment platform for B2B e-commerce, 100% tailored to your needs. Thanks again to our sponsor, Balance. Isaiah, who do we have today?
Yeah, I'm excited to introduce Paul Vragel, who's been I guess you could say in manufacturing for what, 30 plus years, 40 years. I think you've been in
30 years as independent consultant, and a dozen years before that in the Marine Department at Amoco, and I'll talk a little bit about that. And when I left, I was in charge of new technology evaluation for the computer group at Amoco, global responsibility for recommending products to the corporation at the time that all the transition was going from mainframe to PC products.
Yeah.
So no standards, nothing worked together. Very interesting time.
I don't know if you've seen the BlackBerry new movie that came out about BlackBerry. It's definitely a good one. I recommend it. They started in 96 all the way to the demise, to their death in 2015 or whatever it is. But I'd love to hear that kind of timeline, almost that evolution. I think one of the reasons we started this podcast is we're now in this, what I would consider like kind of the front-facing revolution of digital, where manufacturers and distributors and B2B companies, they've typically kind of hid their digital information in their ERPs, and it's been very much in their own systems. And now the consumers and buyers, or the businesses that are buying, are expecting it in their own form where they can log in and buy. And so I think we're kind of in this next wave of like, well, you can't just have everything behind the scenes. You need to have it available for third-party buyers to buy. Obviously Amazon is like the main contributor to that, starting that trend. But I'm curious to hear, like, because you go way back to like pre-PC to PC to like internet to, and I'm sure you've seen, like, I'm curious how you see this all kind of coming together.
Yeah. Well, I'm actually going to start even before that.
Sure, go ahead.
Before the computer? Around before the how old are you, Paul? My God.
We're going to start start with the hammer and chisel. And first we make better chisels, then we get bigger hammers, and it all develops. But so our basic business is helping companies operationally go from here to there in that much time. And I'll tell you the origin story of how I discovered this method, which we used to actually develop buy-in to change across the company in one day. So the origin of that story, of that the approach and the method, repeatable process, if I may, is I am by background and education a naval architect and marine engineer. I went to a college, the three of us would constitute a class reunion. I graduated in a class of 19, only ship design and construction. I was working at a shipyard, and two prior graduates were working for Amoco in Chicago. They put the word out, we need somebody to manage ship construction in Spain. I raised my hand. This is good. This is a great experience, international, working with people I trust, I know and trust. 2 weeks later, I'm on a plane to Spain with my instruction set being figure out what you're supposed to do and do that. Nice instructions. A year later, the Spaniards are building 1,000-foot oil tankers for Amoco. A year later, one of those comes to its dry docking in Lisbon. And my boss says, why don't you go over there and just observe, see what we find from a ship in service, see if we can apply that to the new ships. So I go over there, and one of the inspections that's done is to open up the bottom end bearings of the 30,000 horsepower diesel main engine. We open up the bearings, and all the bearing material that's supposed to be in the bearing is lying on the journal, the crankshaft journal, in pieces. This is bad by any stretch of the imagination.
Even I would see that as bad. Yeah, even I don't know anything, and I would say, "My God, what's going on here?" Right?
That's right. That's right. I call my boss in Chicago, describe to him the situation, and he thinks for a minute, and then he says, "Fix it." Hello? Hello? I'm waiting for the other. No, fix it. So I go to the engine maker. Oh, so he says, fix it. I'm 23. I have no authority. I have no domain knowledge, haven't the faintest idea how they make bearings. No staff, no budget. I don't speak Spanish or Portuguese. We don't have a contract with the engine builder who builds the engine under license from the Danes.
Blame the Danes. That's what I say. Blame the Danes.
That's exactly what they did. So I'm sitting in the hotel room in Spain trying to figure out what I have. And I'm pretty clear that I have nothing at all.
Yeah.
Except that I'm there and determined that we're going to fix this. So it actually got worse. I got permission to go down and see how they made the bearings. Of course, the employees only speak Spanish and I speak English. I expected that. But what I didn't expect was they communicated to me that management told them that I was there to tell them how to fix the bearings. I didn't even know what they did. So this wasn't going to work very well at all. So I had to come up with something that would get us beyond this impossible situation. So I thought, well, what could I do that could turn my lack of knowledge to my advantage? And I thought, well, why don't I just tell them I don't know anything about bearings? You guys know what you are doing every single day. You do that. So why don't we do this? Let's work together and see if we can connect what you're doing in your process to what we see on the bearings. Worked beyond my wildest dreams. They got very enthused about participating and contributing to the fix. In a few weeks, we not only fixed the issues with the bearings, raised their manufacturing capability, and because of the way I choose your poison, invented or was forced to work with them, the management and the employees own all the process changes and the results. And I looked at that as, this is astounding. I start with nothing and we get a transformation of what they're actually doing. So
did everyone recognize your role in asking this question and making these things happen, or how did what developed from there?
Well, it really, my role was just subsumed. I mean, I didn't have any ego involved because I didn't know anything. It required some ego suppression to say, I don't know anything, but here are people.
That was actually the solution, is to be the one that admits that you're not the expert in bearings and potentially these other guys. So I'm just curious, did they kind of go evaluate the broken ship, or how did they, like, is there anything you can give us about how they kind of went about solving it? Or,
well, so these bearings are 2-3 feet in diameter. So what they did is they shipped one of the bearings back to Spain so they could look at it, and then they were in continuous production with these engines. So we looked at things that we saw in the process. It was basically a porosity problem. So we saw things that we saw in the process, tried fixing them. Not all of them worked. So it was an iterative.
So the metal porous is what you're saying? Metal.
Right. So finally, I mean, that's what took a couple of weeks is
figuring out
to do it.
And then do they go and replace those bearings, or how do they go and fix that?
Well, they had to make a complete set of new bearings. We had 2 other ships sailing around the world with bearings made by that original process. And the characteristic of this is the engine will continue to run until you open that bearing, and now you need to replace it wholesale.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. So there was a whole process at the back end of this.
Yeah.
Of making a new set of bearings, shipping it to a repair yard, replacing the bearings in the engine, shipping the old ones back. They're reusable. I mean, the casting is still usable, but just pull all the bearing material out, and then you can remake that bearing and then ship it off to the next ship.
Yeah.
So it was a long process, the core of which was fix the issue that's generating.
Make the product better so that it would it would work better, basically. Right.
Yeah, exactly. So the 2 things that I took from that two core principles that I took from that are one, and which I use today. One, 90% of the issues that waste time and money and produce bad results in the company are embedded in process and interactions, with the caveat that that's usually different than how it's documented or expected that they work, which was certainly the case in making the bearings. The second core principle is employees are the world's experts at knowing what they actually do every day. No training required. They know what they do. Not necessarily task experts, but what they do, they know. So if you're trying to take the company from here to there, not knowing how that process really works, how the process in the company really works, is a pretty big obstacle. And the reasons that that situation exists is very relevant to what we're talking about today. IT systems that don't support the business operations, either because they didn't ask the people in the company who actually use them what do you need, what they need, or because the business has moved on beyond what that technology is capable of doing. Employees still need to do their work. So what's the workaround? Excel. Beautiful. Lots of Excel. So that's a situation that you see. Workarounds because processes are inefficient or ineffective, and people just work around them. Tribal knowledge that wasn't captured, or issues related to change and growth. All of those combined, it's very, very common. You don't end up with the system really working the way it's documented or expected.
So, a couple questions. So, in the original example, trusting the people, I totally get that. I think it's really incredible that you thought this at age 23. But which part of the process was the biggest issue? Was it the metallurgy to begin with? Was it the engineering? Was it something in the manufacturing of it, not the engineering of it, or not the type of metal? Was it that there was no quality control? I mean, like, where was the failure that these things were, being installed in ships and then failing?
So the core issue, so this was a porosity issue. There was porosity in the bearing, and then as the pressure rises and falls, it eventually pounds that out. That was the dynamic there. So what we saw in their process, metallurgy was fine, but this is a poured metal bearing. So they're pouring the metal into an annulus.
Mm-hmm.
And as you pour it in, you entrain air.
Yep.
So the process that they had for getting the air out, well, two pieces. Do it so you don't introduce as much air, and then do a better job of relieving all of the entrained air. So it was a process problem.
Okay.
It was fine. Design of the bearing was fine, but the actual production process for the bearing in the bearing housing, that's what was defective.
Okay, cool. So did they catch more problems as time passed because they changed their processes? Like other new problems, like what happened 5 years later because of this awakening?
We operated the ships for another dozen years without any issues.
Okay.
So
So they fixed all of their processes and there were no more issues. It's good.
literally resolved it completely. And as I say, that was just, to me, it was astounding that we could get there, given what I had to work with.
And they must have given you $100 million bonus for all of this, anticipation, right?
Oh yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
Absolutely. I negotiated that up front. Yeah.
And,
That's excellent. That's excellent. Sorry, I said.
I guess my question is, do you find that, and this might be just always been the problem, but I could see it being even a bigger problem now, that executives and leadership are so far removed, especially the bigger the company, from the actual work going on, that no one's really going in and they don't even really know how to do the work sometimes, right? Because they might not be the engineers, or they might not be the marketers or the IT staff. And so you have these layers that everything's so far removed that they're just kind of shouting down orders, but they're the wrong orders. And we see this all the time with clients making guesses and things, ideas and roadmaps, and it's based on assumptions and no real reality, right? Because you only really know until you have the results, I guess.
Yes, it is a core issue in manufacturing, that the top management doesn't really know how things work.
And they can't make the product. Like, they probably couldn't even, I bet if you asked most of the executive manufacturing leaders, they probably couldn't go run the warehouse or whatever, the plant, and make the product themselves.
Well, they couldn't, and it's really, I mean, in a sense, it's not really their job, but it is their job to create an environment in which the right things can happen. And if you don't believe, if you're the CEO and you don't believe that things work differently, then that changes what you're going to be, the directions you're going to put out, the areas that you want to focus on. So I'll give you an example from one of our clients. This is a automotive parts supplier. They're operating at lower quartile performance versus their peers. The chief engineer is off on medical leave. The quality manager has left for another division, and they have to get a certification in automotive in 3 months, and they have not started to prepare for that at all. So I went in, and I'll explain a little bit more about the process here, but just to get to the results. In 30 days, taking advantage of the fact that the employees know what really happens every day, and just listening to that, capturing that visually, so what I call a visual twin of the company. As you do that, all the things that need work and will move the needle in the company appear. And you have the opportunity to fix those right away, because it's very clear you're dealing with reality, not the beliefs that people have of how things work. In 30 days, in building this visual twin, so three shift operation, of course, every shift operates differently, we actually fixed 75 issues in that company. Everything from front-end order process to production to supply chain to manufacturing, engineering, everywhere in the company, 75 issues, not listed, actually found, discovered, and resolved.
Wow.
Within 6 months, they had a 30% increase in earnings without firing anybody. They were a Ford and Chrysler supplier. As part of getting them essentially bulletproof process, we also created, when you're at lower quartile performance, you have a blame culture. Everybody blames everybody else for what's going on.
Oh, I'm very aware of this. You can tell the difference between clients that are beating their numbers and the ones that are not beating their numbers.
Yep. Yeah, we've all seen that.
Exactly.
It's like
so we created what I call an improvement seeking culture. Everybody is in on finding ways to make it work better without blaming anybody else. It's, you know, you see something that you're working with, that there's something in a prior process that's causing that. Great, raise it, implement the change immediately. It changes the whole dynamic in the company. He looked at that and said, well, we could go after Toyota. They pursued and got in 12 months their first ever business with Toyota.
Yeah. So let's come back to this, because a lot of what we talk, I want to tie back, you know, at the end of the day, the people that we're trying to help usually make something or distribute something, or maybe the retailer, but with some B2B. And so we don't go that into the weeds on that, because a lot of what we're talking about is, you know, we believe that kind of the old ways of, hey, I need to reorder this, or I need this, calling up, faxing, it's not that efficient, right? There's better ways to get information now digitally through, you know, e-commerce platforms, and maybe exposing data from the ERP. I'm curious how you see that. Like, have you ever mapped kind of what's the process of a client or their customers ordering, from like picking up the phone to order from them all the way back to the manufacturing? And is it a lot of the same fundamental, like, kind of wrong thinking of why, you know, the same problems, I guess, whether it's they're making or they're trying to improve the IT or the ordering process, you know?
Yeah, the disconnects all, if you had to pick one cause, all occur because they never got to understand the real process.
Mm-hmm.
What is a customer actually doing? What do they actually want to be able to do? What are the things that could go wrong in this process? So part of that is you really need to look at have a problem solving systems. You can't, if you don't really understand how it works and what might go wrong, you're not going to have that mentality of looking at, okay, this might go wrong. What do we put in place to make sure, excuse me, that it doesn't go wrong? And that trails all the way in from the customer into how are we going to support this in the company. If for instance, you're relying on some connections you're making to the ERP system to enable this digital life, if you will, and the reality is a lot of things that happen there are manual systems. The ERP is supposed to do this, but there's Helen over in purchasing who sees that really this doesn't meet what they need. So she has this Excel sheet over here that she's using to manage that, you know, adjust that part of the process. And that those things are rife regarding ERP systems. People make manual adjustments to things, and now what you're expecting when the customer is presented by the system with these options, that they can select these options and the rest of the system will take care of it. Well, at some point it hits the adjustment that didn't get made by Helen.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah.
And the system says we have 24 of these. Helen knows we only have 6. And 3 hours ago we sold those. So customer sees 24 available.
Yeah.
You can have it in whatever.
That's the thing. E-commerce is only going to work if the systems and the data and the information is accurate. Otherwise, it's pretty much useless, right? I mean, so
yes. Helen's the problem. Get rid of Helen. Get rid of Helen. That's what I would. Right. That's it. I want algorithms and bots.
I'll give you an example of this problem, which is, this is a little bit of a tangent, but it reminds me of this. Is the company wasn't hitting their numbers, classic blame culture. And now they're having new issues. They relaunched some things, and their SEO is not doing as well. And then it turns out we talked to the person trying to dig in, and we're not even billing them for this. We're like, look, we're going to help you. We want to have a long-term partnership. And she goes, well, they laid off the copywriter, and they didn't transfer 300,000 products that are discontinued, but technically those products were useful because they were on the website and they would get organic traffic and people would find them and then maybe go to a different product, like a live product. So here's 2 problems that we identified. They didn't have all their product data the way it was supposed to in the old site, and they laid off their copywriter. So there's no one who had time to make the product data better on the website for Google to want to search it. And they didn't transfer over all this data. But the executives are looking for the magic bullet to solve this problem.
Right. Yeah.
Like, you see where I'm like, and then we're going to get blamed because, we're the guys that just are following orders and building things, right? But at the end of the day, they're going to hold us probably responsible for some level of the results. But the core problems some of them, there's a lot of core problems that we identified, are the fact that they don't have a strategy for their data.
Yeah. Well, the 4 pieces that I have found really essential to getting buy-in on day one to change and really setting the company up for transformational improvement in productivity and growth. The 4 are, it's relatively simple and straightforward. 1, you have to eliminate fear. As soon as some big initiative comes along or a consultant shows up, the first thing in employees' minds is somebody's going to get fired here.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I hope it's not me.
It's the Office Space. You remember the Office Space, the Bobs, and
yes, right.
Bosses or Bob or
So if you don't address that on day 1, literally in minute 1, your initiative is already dead and you don't know it.
Yeah.
You don't know the exact
people
form
are scared
of death.
to tell you the truth. They're scared to tell you the real problems. They're scared to make change because it might eliminate their job. If people are scared for their jobs, then nothing's going to get accomplished, right?
Right. And the second thought that goes through people's mind is, here we go again. We tried this.
Yeah, and it's going to fail.
It didn't work, so I'll play along. This too shall pass. And our response to that is, don't respond to it, is to say, we're here because there's some issue that the company wants to address, something that says tomorrow cannot be just a rerun today. But you guys are the world's experts at knowing what really happens here every day. So we're not looking for low-hanging fruit. We're not looking for low-performance employees. This is about productivity and growth for the company. And when we achieve that, which we will, it's opportunity for everybody. And the other piece is they're expecting the traditional consultant to come in and start training and tools and telling them what to do. And my message is, what I really want to understand is, how does this really work? Because that's the root of everything. If you don't understand how it works, you're going to put things on top of that, or in the case that you cited, you're putting things on top of that that don't mesh with reality. So we're going to talk with you, listen to you as you work and where you work. So I'm not talking about Post-it notes on the wall. I'm talking about what actually happens everywhere, front to back, top to bottom. And as we do that, all of the things that need work, so we're going to lay that out visually. Don't generate a bunch of text documents, because people use those instead of Somonex. Lay it out visually so you can see how all the pieces really actually fit. As the issues emerge, which they will, engage the employees right away in fixing those. Don't create this grand 6 months project and then 6 smart people in a room sit down and say, well, this is what we're going to do. And then this flows down to the employees, and the employees look at this and say, well, that won't work, but okay, you're the boss. And you get those kind of situations where this doesn't mesh with reality. What we're trying, what the management is trying to do doesn't mesh. So get to reality, right? Take out the fear. Acknowledge to employees that they're the world's experts at knowing what they actually do every day. Capture the real, get to reality fast, really fast. If you do this in 2 years, nobody cares. If you do it in 6 months, nobody cares. If you do that in weeks, so you've got a real clear roadmap of the whole company. How do things come in? Where do they go? Who does what? When? Where? How? All the issues show up. Fix them as they come up. That's how we got to fixing 75 issues in 30 days.
Yeah.
So I have a question for you. Have
Yeah.
you got to a situation where the employees really didn't know what they were doing, right? I mean, because that seems to be a big premise of everything you're talking about, is that everyone knows the process. You just have to talk to them about it and they'll share, and then you can figure it all out. Are there companies that are so bad where the employees have no idea what they're doing?
Honestly, I haven't encountered that, because they come in and they do know what they're actually doing. Let's say that there's two levels of meaning there. One is, do you know what you're doing? And the second is, do you know why you're doing it?
Mm-hmm.
Right. A whole bunch of situations where you don't know why you're doing it.
Yeah, just being told to do it. Yeah.
But what you're actually doing, they know. They really do. They really do know. And I agree with what you said, that people say, "Oh, they just don't know what they're doing." Well, they understand. They know what they're actually doing. what you haven't done as the management is spend the time to understand what they're actually doing and how that differs from what your expectation is, or
Or
their
what the customer
understanding
wants.
that,
Yeah, or what the customer wants. Because if the customer doesn't want it, then they could do whatever they want, and it's not going to make any money. You know.
right. So part of the issue then is connecting what does reality look like to what does the customer want. And if you can't make a connection there, that's the reason. I mean, the changes get driven by one of two things: customers or money, right? So if you're not doing what the customer wants, and you could actually afford to do that, you're not going to have success.
You're not doing a very good job with your business. Yeah,
yeah, exactly. So I really haven't seen
that, because I think the reason that B2B e-commerce is so complicated and hard to measure is I don't think that companies are facing reality and really talking to not even young, because I think young is the wrong word now, older millennial procurement buyers who are 40 years old. Like, Tim, we talk about this, like the millennials, millennials aren't that young anymore. It's now like this next generation. I'm in the middle, but like my friends that are a little older than me, like they're 40 years old. And so those are buyers that expect a digital experience.
Yep.
And I think that a lot of B2B manufacturing distribution companies aren't facing the reality that asking them to call you up for every order is no longer what they want. And so they're just, so maybe to your point, I think they're kind of just ignoring the reality, or they kind of like don't want that reality, I guess, I think is partly what's happening.
Well, part of it, and I actually had this discussion with a company years and years ago. They were they were the administrative group for a pension fund, and they weren't allowing their pensioners to make a change. It had to be like once a year they could make a change to their allocations, and all the Fidelities and et cetera of the world are letting you go in and change every day if you want.
Yeah, the market change.
And one of the points I made to them is they said, we don't have any competition because all the pensioners have to use our system. And I said, that's not the competition. The competition is the expectation, because they can do this with Fidelity. They want to be able to do it with you. Same, yep. I mean, exactly what you're saying, because you can go on Amazon and do all of this buy and return and change. You've got all of this flexibility. Now I want to be.
Amazon does billions in their B2B programs. I have a business account with Amazon Trellis.
Yeah. So the expectation of the customer is created by the environment. And the environment says, I want to be able to do this. No, I don't want to call anybody. I want to be able to do this online, make this transaction, and I'm done. And making that happen, when a company first have the management incentive to do that, or understanding that that's the environment, piece one. And piece two, understand that unless you really do understand how things actually work, you're not going to get there. And if they work, for instance, if you're if your whole process for updating stock and inventory and purchase order status or changes, if all of that is a manual process and you're expecting reliable data at, to the customer, you're not going to get there.
Yeah.
It's not going to be there. So you really need to understand where all those pieces of the system, including Helen and all of her friends.
So let me ask one other thing, because I think you mentioned this before we started to record, and I wanted to see if I could have you bring it up now. You had talked, we're talking a lot about customers, right? And how important they are, and just understanding what their desires are. So what was the example you were giving about a customer who actually sat in a cubicle at this company? Could you
Yes.
talk about that? I think that was, our listeners might enjoy that.
So I had a client. The management had inherited a system that was command and control. So the issue was, if anything came up, let's find out who did it and let's fix them.
Fix them.
Okay. So their performance was so bad that the customer put a spy in their operation. And their cubicle was labeled customer spy. Everybody knew that they were the customer spy.
I love that.
Because they had tried all sorts of stuff to get things to work better. And they were an industry, so they're supplying spare parts for a major automotive.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what happens when you take your car in, right? You call them and you say, I need this fixed. They look at it and say, okay, bring it in Tuesday. It'll take a day and it'll be fine. And now you have to call them up and say, well, we didn't get the part from the distribution center. Really mad customers, really irate customers. What we did, again, let's go first to reality. And it can be simple things. So they had teams that were picking parts, or they had someone who was picking parts, and then they had teams that were assembling those into shipments.
Mm-hmm.
Well, each team had their own little language for marking the paperwork to say, we got this, or we tried and we couldn't find it. They had their own language for all of those little. So if someone didn't show up on a day, they got paired with someone else who didn't have the same language or marks on the papers. And things went out wrong on a regular basis. It's really simple, but they didn't really understand at that level, this is what's really happening.
Why do you think this is happening? I assume this happens a lot in manufacturing. Is it also because these companies have been around for so long that the original inventors are gone or not involved, and there's these big bureaucracies? Like, I guess I'm curious. I mean, I'm sure it's a symptom of every company, but what do you think makes it so unique to manufacturing, or maybe worse in manufacturing, at these probably larger organizations?
There is a lot more, I think, tribal knowledge.
Yeah.
In manufacturing.
Yeah, that makes sense.
At a level of detail that doesn't exist.
Yeah. Like only this guy knows how to paint the thing the way that he paints it, and it's in his head, and like there's no document for how to paint the last little thing. Like I'm just making that up, but that's
Right. Here's three people. This guy is the only guy who can make this product. Okay. What?
It's not very
Why?
scalable. It's not going to scale. Yeah.
What happens if he's
going-
hit by a
what's
bus?
going
I
on
mean,
here?
what's going on with that, right?
So
Yeah.
and yeah, so I guess that makes a lot of sense, because if you think about manufacturing, they need to scale and produce as much as cheaply and fast and best as possible. But if you have all this tribal knowledge, that's like the opposite of that solution, because it's not scalable, right? And so, yeah,
Right.
I'm just kind of like repeating the problem to myself, just to kind of explain it in layman's terms, I guess.
Yeah.
You know, I think this is really, great, Paul. And we're getting close to wrap up time, so I want to make sure that
We definitely need to bring Paul back for I think
we
we
gotta
should
bring
have
you
like
back,
ERP.
I think.
We're gonna have a separate ERP episode, because I told you we'd use the episode, so that's the problem. People are like, oh, an hour, what should we talk about? I'm like, we'll ask you 3 questions and we'll fill up the episode. That's not going to be the problem.
I think so. I think we're gonna. So, but we try to give our guests a little bit of a final word. So do you have something that you want to make sure that our listeners hear before we wrap up today?
Well, I would say the core principles to getting buy-in and getting large scale change in growth. It really, in my experience, having done this for 30 years, there are 4 key elements to do that. One, you've got to eliminate fear right out of the box. If you don't do that, if you don't address that, your initiative is dead and you don't know it. Acknowledge to the employees directly, it's not a secret, that you know that they are the ones who know what really happens every day. Recognizing that, go very quickly after understanding how the real system works. Not a list of problems that you have to fix.
Mm-hmm.
How does it actually work? Because engage all of the knowledge that exists in the employees and your own knowledge. This doesn't usurp management. This gets the whole organization executing on the things that at the high level management wants to accomplish. Implement right away.
Management needs to also buy in and document their own day-to-day, right? Everyone needs to be,
right. And the other piece, which I have I have a quote from one of my clients on the website that says, if we had understood how easy this would be on our organization and how quickly we would achieve results, we would have started months ago. And it's a big difference to come in and create this environment where people are willing to contribute, because we're asking, what do they do? We're not asking, what's your problem? Because as we know, problems have owners, and now we're on the search for the guilty.
Yeah. And then
So I think
that culture of fear. Then you're creating the culture of fear, because everyone's out to go find the guy that made the problem, made the mistake, and fire him or reprimand him, and everyone's just scared.
Right. And since we're in World Series time, I'll give you one baseball analogy, which is bad process bats about .837 against good people. It just, a bad process will defeat people trying to do the right thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
If I knew anything about baseball, that might resonate. I don't
Yeah, I
know.
had to think about it, but basically he was saying you're going to be the best hitter of all
Yeah,
time.
a good hitter is batting 250.
Yeah, so you're like the best hitter of all time just by bad process will kill your A players because yeah, that makes sense.
Right.
I want to ask well, I guess I just want to tie it back because one of the things we see as a big detriment in adoption of B2B commerce culture and processes is that, and it makes a lot of sense now with what you're saying, is that sales reps aren't necessarily always on board with B2B commerce. And what I think is partly, maybe it's not all, but partly responsible is that they're afraid they're going to lose their jobs. So when a company goes and says, we're going to automate and bring everything online, well, probably the first thing that most of these sales reps are thinking is they're going to try to replace me with a website.
That's their fear. That's the fear piece.
Yeah. Right. So if you want to make this happen, you gotta, and we do talk about this in podcasts, you need to overcome that, show how it's going to enable them. It's a tool for them to get more commission because they can sell 24/7 and, call the customer up after they place orders, give them advice. But it's not an easy thing to overcome, right? You have to kind of show them how that's possible, but at the most basic level, it's a common problem we talk about in this podcast and many guests have talked about. It probably ties mostly back to the fear culture. So
yeah, if you get that, if you address that first, everything beyond that.
Let me ask one last question because we're definitely running out of time. What is one of the best things you've seen? It could be simple, small anecdote of reducing fear and getting to reality. Was it just like that you saw maybe a manager do, or that you were like, wow, this guy, he gets it?
Well, I'll give you an example of. So I had as part of this develop buy into change in a day, I made a general manager of a company introduced me. He said, here's Paul, he's going to help us do XYZ. And I went through basically the 4 things that I laid out. And I had one of the guys, you would recognize these guys who they have more stroke in the company than it appears by their title or position. Mm-hmm. He looks at me straight in the eye and he says, we'll see about that. So I didn't say anything. I've been doing this for 30 years. I know how this is going to play out. Not exactly, but pretty sure. In a few weeks, working with the rest of the organization and how the process really worked, we fix an issue that he's been working on for 2 years. Fixed, done, gone. He has a very interesting dilemma. He had this bully pulpit, which he had because he kept saying to everybody, oh, we tried all this and it didn't work. And he was right, which gave him his bully pulpit. Now he has a very interesting dilemma because this just did work right up front, close and personal. I'm 0 for lifetime in seeing anybody give up a bully pulpit. I like that position. His choice was to become irrelevant by keeping on saying this doesn't work, or to become a convert. He became a convert, and we got all of his authority inside the company, informal authority, working for us right away. So a relatively simple transformation there that had a big effect on the company.
That's a good note to end on. That's pretty great. I like that.
Yeah, we'll definitely have to have you back, and I know you do a lot of work with ERP and Infor and Sightline, so I want to get into that on another episode. But Yeah, really appreciated this. I feel like I'm even just thinking about our own management structure, and I'm like, oh man, how much fear do we have like that I don't know about, and how much money is that costing us? You know what I mean? Like now I'm scared of the own fear that we have in our own company, you know?
Right. Well, it's transferable. I mean, one of the other things I concluded after that experience in Spain was this works for individual problem, organization, company-wide, across industries, which
Yeah.
has been proven. But I'd be happy to engage again and have another discussion.
Well, thank you, Paul. Thank you.
Thank you so much.